Hey, check out my book series, Month of Miracles. They're monthly collections of daily affirmations to accelerate you along your spiritual path. Download volumes 1 through 3 for free at www.michaelmiracles.com/ebooks. Hi, Michael Miracles here. I'm back again to follow up on one of my first videos I did. It's what not to do as a new yoga teacher or a yoga teacher in general. I'd like to go a little bit deeper into the why nots, but also explore some counter arguments to the point and see if they hold up, or maybe to see if there's some room to be a little bit more lenient on my stance. With all these videos, with everything I do in my life, I'm trying to be open-minded and I'm trying to see all the perspectives. But when teaching yoga, when doing yoga, it's important, I think so, to give the best you can to your students and to give them the best opportunity to get the most out of the practice. So here again, to add on or to refute what not to do as a yoga teacher. Number 1, don't teach from your mat. Well, there might be some exceptions to that. Teaching from your mat is one thing, demonstrating is another thing. So the exceptions I'm going to give are more when it's okay to demonstrate, not the whole class, only for a pose or two, whenever it makes the most sense. When you have a class and you have brand new students who've never done yoga before, it might be a good idea to demonstrate more, to be on your mat sometimes, but not there the whole time. It's also really important, though, if the students are new, to keep your eyes on them. The reason why it might be, this is an exception perhaps, is because how it works for most people. When you do yoga for the first time or the second time or the first few times, you learn quicker by seeing. So that would give you more emphasis to actually demonstrate what poses you're calling, demonstrate how to do the poses. But if you're teaching a class that has experienced yogis, people who've done it several times, and a new student in the mix, instead of just being confined to your mat and not being able to see the class, I'd suggest finding out if your student's new and asking them to set up in the center of the class. That way, no matter where they look, they'll be able to see other people doing the poses, and you won't have to make the pose. You won't have to break your concentration on the class to do it. Another instance to demonstrate the pose is, even if you do have mixed levels of yogis in the group, even if you do have maybe a few new ones mixed in, if you call a pose and you start cueing it, and nobody's really responding or kind of getting right what the pose is, position yourself in a place where the most people in the room can see you and demonstrate the pose from there. Once enough people clearly, oh, that's the pose they were talking, oh yes, straight and left leg, then go back to watching the class. But instead of demonstrating it yourself, another option you might take is, if there is a person that's not quite in the pose that you called, just give them a physical adjustment and cue verbally as you adjust them. But again, if that's not an option, then demonstrate it. But as you're demonstrating the pose, cue the major elements of it. If you're teaching from your mat all the time, you're not sinning, you're not doing anything bad for anybody, but you're not maximizing your potential as a teacher. Another possible exception to the rule, don't teach from your mat, is if there's mirrors in the room. If there's mirrors and you're teaching from your mat, it's a little bit easier to see the class. You're looking around peripherally while you're still practicing. You could see the class a lot more. So that's a possible exception. But many times the class would benefit from your full attention. Your attention's scattered if you're trying to do the pose, if you're still trying to breathe while doing the pose, while you're cueing it, while you're talking, while you're still trying to look at the students. That's splintered attention, that's multitasking. And some of us are pretty good at multitasking, but potentially we're all a lot better at focusing in on one or a combination of congruent things at the same time. Now, there are some types of yoga classes that traditionally, or what's come to be expected, is that the teacher is actually practicing. There is one type of class in Pittsburgh that I go to regularly where the teacher does actually practice along with the class. I still go to that class, but the teacher who's doing it's really an excellent teacher. And everyone in that room, it's more of an advanced class. So everyone in that room really knows the sequence. It is the same sequence every time. Everyone in the room knows how to do most of the poses, most of the time, unless it's their first time doing it. So I give a pass to that teacher, which leads to the next example. You find yourself in a studio where they say, you must practice while you teach. In which case, I would suggest seeing if that aligns with what you want to do. If you're like, okay, yeah, I could get a practice in and teach, I'm going to go for it. Yeah, go for it. But don't purposely go against what the studio owner is asking you to do. Maybe you don't teach that class. Still on the topic of teaching from your mat, I have to come clean. I have to admit something. I do teach from my mat sometimes. My rule of thumb is if there's only one or two students, and especially if I know them, or especially if I know that they have decent practices, that they know the poses, I find it a little bit more natural if you're teaching, if you're instructing, and you make the decision, oh yeah, I'm going to practice. If you're making that decision, I'm going to practice and teach at the same time, only because you haven't found any other time to practice that day, or you just want to get an extra class in, that might be slightly more of a self-interested move than it would be if you were completely there, full attention for the students. So not to be flip-flopping back and forth here, I just wanted to call myself out and say that I'm not 100% perfect. The reason this video exists in the first place, too, is many things in life, maybe everything in life, isn't just one way or the other. Being so stuck on your ways, being so tied into a certain way of doing things is really limiting to you. So what I would suggest, in some ways, I'm telling this to myself as much as anybody watching this, be open to other points of view and see if it works. Try it out. That goes for if you're disagreeing with a lot of the things I say on this YouTube channel. All I say is, if you're here in the first place and you're interested in how to teach better, give this stuff a try and see if it works. You might feel nervous to do something different than normal, but hey, that's where a lot of advances are made in life. Moving on to the next major sticking point in what not to do as a yoga teacher is the use of music in class. Some people are really, really caught up on this. And again, let's explore it, because I don't want to just be like, I'm right. Nope, there's no other way. So let's take a look at some of the things that people say to me and have actually commented in a previous video why they're hesitant not to use music in class. First thing I hear a lot is, well, what if the music's like ambient, instrumental, something you'd hear at a spa or while you're getting a massage? I'd say that's better than playing pop music. That's better than playing Drake. Reason being is it's more atmospheric, it's more natural. You don't get stuck up on the meaning of words. You don't get as much stuck up on if there's, beats and a lot of bass in the music, stuck up on trying to maybe start dancing to the music while you're practicing. But especially if you're teaching Vinyasa Yoga, the music gets in the way of the breathing. Not just the students being able to be clear and attentive to if they are actually breathing slowly enough using Ujjayi breath, which has sound to it. If you can hear your students breathe, your timing improves, and the student's experience of Vinyasa Yoga improves when they're connecting the breath to the movement. Some other people have asked, what about live music? That's an answer to one of my reasons not to play music is that it's not the present moment. When students are taking their attention to music on the outside, everything that you're playing on a playlist on Spotify, on a Apple Music, or even if you're still playing a CD, that's all pre-recorded. That's all happened in the past. So it's training the mind to do what it does a lot, which is focusing on something outside that's already happened before. So the live music thing, that's an answer to it. But again, the music gets in the way with your ability to hear the breath and to move the class. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we really teaching? Is it just a movement class? In that case, use music, whatever. Or are you actually trying to teach yoga? A simple way of putting it, to teach yoga, you're teaching meditation. The yoga, the physical poses, the sensations that are produced in the body as you're doing the poses, and the combination with pranayama, the breathing, facilitates and makes it easier, and my one teacher says, tricks the students into meditating. To really have the experience of yoga for students, there must be meditation involved. And when you're playing music, or even if it's a live musician playing, you're not meditating if you're not focusing in on something that's happening in the present moment or something from within. And your breath is always in the present moment and it's always happening from within. Other people have said, Michael, I just love moving to music. Great, I do too. What I say to that is, let's go dancing after class. We could do that. We can go dancing after class. Why not do both? You'll be more loose and limber and less likely to be sore after a whole night of dancing. Another viable option isn't yoga, but still can be meditative. I don't know a lot about this, but I've done it a few times and it was great. It's something called ecstatic dance. There's music in that. It's a conscious, similar to a dance party, but with some exceptions to most dance party, including there's no alcohol or drugs. There's consent of dancing with somebody else. There's no talking with each other, so it becomes meditative, or it becomes more in the moment. And the other thing, the 3-4 times I've done it, there's not just dancing, but there's people doing yoga shapes as well. So I think that might be a good alternative. Do yoga, do ecstatic dance. Don't try to bring gimmicks into the yoga. The yoga is much more powerful without the music. So I got to make another confession too. When I practice yoga alone, I sometimes do put music on. It typically is exactly what I want to listen to at the time. It typically is something that's more ambient, more instrumental. But the reason why I do that sometimes is I'm by myself. And this is a major point that I find in yoga classes is when you come to a class, there's community built in. You're in it with other people. You're not alone. When you're focusing in on something else, it tends to make you more isolated. When you're focusing in on a room full of people all doing the same thing at the same time, it makes you feel, at least it makes me feel like I have company. It makes me feel like I'm part of something. That goes to my next point. A great reason to go to a class is to practice being a part of something greater than yourself. When you connect your movements, when you do the same pose at the same time with a room full of people, and especially when you're breathing with a whole room full of people, it bypasses that part of your mind that's analyzing, judging, criticizing, and you have moments, and sometimes extended periods of time, where you lose track of the individual self and you're a part of something greater. So if you're practicing on your own, I mean, that's great. Maybe put some music on, as long as you can still keep track of your own breathing. Other people ask me, well, what about more of a restorative or a yin class? For me, the jury's still out on that. In a restorative or a yin class, you're not using ujjayi breath, the breath with sound, to move the class together. There's not a lot of movement involved. So maybe I'll do another video about that in the future. Other people have asked me, well, I love the music because it takes me out of my head. I'm focusing in on the music and I'm not noticing my thoughts. Well, that actually is the opposite of yoga. Ideally, we're using the yoga poses, the breathing, to bring up the thoughts, to make you aware that you're having these thoughts. Because even if you're focusing in on something else, the thoughts are still occurring more on an unseen subconscious level. Ideally, when you're teaching mindfulness in yoga, you realize the thoughts that are coming up, and then you're able to either pursue that line of thinking, or what's way more advantageous in a yoga class, and I'd say in most situations in life, is to let that thought go, especially if the thought is at all stressful. It's very common to have multiple thoughts about how the pose is going, how the teacher's doing, the conditions in the room, is it too hot? A lot of opinions and judgments about the pose. That's exactly what we want. When you can see those thoughts, you can then decide, you have a moment of, do I stick down to that stressful line of thinking, or do I take myself out of, do I take that part of my mind out of the equation and enhance the part of my mind that's calm and collected and present and focused on exactly what I'm doing when I'm doing it? So when you're always distracting yourself, and let's face it, most of us a lot of the time are with our phones, with watching stuff on the internet, with drugs, with alcohol, whatever your vices are. When we bring our attention in to our thoughts so that we can realize them, we let the stressful ones go and we begin to heal and grow from there. When we're always distracted, those thoughts just linger. They grow in the dark like mold. And most of us aren't aware of them very often until the pressure builds so much and the stress from those thoughts build up into actions and reactions in our lives that we're not very proud of. That's one major source of a lot of the regrettable things we might do in our lives, especially when we snap and yell at someone that doesn't deserve it. When you start to see your own shit and decide that it is not yours, it's not you, and you are actually the calm, witnessing presence of the situation, that tends to progress your overall being. So when you're not in a yoga class, things that you've learned how to process the thoughts and to let them go can allow you to become more even-keeled, more present, more calm, more of a joy to be around. And that's one major thing we're trying to do with all of this yoga is feel better internally and be more of a calming, more of a helpful presence to those around us. Are you teaching meditation, or are you making it really hard for students to meditate? At least here in Pittsburgh, most of the Vinyasa Yoga classes do have music, and people keep going back to it. And people will report, yeah, I feel good after the class. What happens is, when you're teaching yoga like that, you're providing a temporary relief. Same thing as you get temporary relief for drinking 3 glasses of wine, taking some pills, binge watching 5 episodes of Stranger Things on Netflix. It takes you out of your head for a while, which does feel relieving. But what I mentioned earlier, those stressful thought patterns stick in there. They grow. They'll come back. They'll keep coming back. So when you're driving back from your yoga class and someone cuts you off in traffic, you're right back in stress mode. Screw that person. If you got taught mindfulness yoga, if you actually dealt with some of those things that lead to a stressful outburst in other parts of your life, that's the difference. Instead of the temporary relief, which you get as well, you also have a potential for lasting change. So then same situation happens and you had a class that didn't have music to it and you really focused in on the breathing and the meditation. That same situation when someone cuts you off in traffic, maybe you don't get stressed. Oh, okay, they did that. Oh, I noticed that I'm breathing calmly still. That's just a very minor example of the difference between a yoga class that provides temporary relief and a yoga class that can actually help produce lasting change in your life. In the yoga world, in pressure in modern society and corporate society and consumerist society to compete and to be able to keep the doors open, to keep the lights turned on in your yoga studio, you have all of these instances of gimmicking up yoga. Oh, let's do a Drake class. I really do like Drake, don't I? Let's do a dubstep class. Let's do a class where there's bunny rabbits hopping around. Let's do a class where we're massaging people's feet and putting essential oils on their forehead throughout the class. Let's make it a spa day. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, but it all gets in the way of what yoga can really do for your students and for you. Try this stuff out, see if it works, and if you have any questions, you want to talk more about it, maybe you can change my mind. I welcome it. Let's just keep it civil. Let's just really listen to each other and leave comments below. And if you're enjoying these videos, please subscribe. It's a new channel, so get in on the ground floor. Hit the subscribe button. Thanks again, Michael Miracles. Peace out. Hi, yoga friends. Michael Miracles here of michaelmiracles.com. Has yoga had an impact on your life? Are you looking to expand on that connection and maybe even share it with others? Or maybe you just really love what yoga's been doing for you and you want to go deeper. I've taught yoga full-time for over 8 years. I'm in ERYT 500 with the Yoga Alliance, and I've taught over 1,000 classes. I've taken part in 10 trainings, tested all these methods, and figured out what works and what doesn't. All of this has culminated in Unity Vinyasa teacher training. Take control of your yoga practice today and start changing lives. Go to michaelmiracles.com/teacher training for more information.